Hi, good morning everyone. I am the assigned reporter in Gen's Conditions of Learning. But before we're going to tackle about this, let's first know and identify who is this particular person. Who is Gens? Also known as Robert Miles Gen, was an American educational psychologist, best known for his conditions of learning. He pioneered the science of instruction during World War II when he worked with the Army Air Corps training pilots. Hindi lang mahusay bilang isang psychologist, si Gens. Mahusay rin siya bilang isang pioneer na namuno sa science instruction, especially during World War II. That Gens has great contribution from that particular era. Next, we have also Gens principles. And those principles, the first one is different instruction is required for different learning outcomes. Yes, most of the time, nakadepende sa instruction ng teacher yung magiging outcomes nito. So that kung ano yung learning outcomes na need ng student, yun din dapat yung instruction na i-apply ng teacher. Gen's theory asserts that there are several different types of levels of learning. Furthermore, the theory implies that each different type of learning calls for different types of instruction. Ito na nga, na dapat in different type of learning, kinakailangan rin ng different type of instruction of the teacher for them to achieve their outcomes and goals in conducting of his or her lesson. Gen's principles, another. Gen named the 5 categories of learning. The first one is the verbal information, intellectual skills, cognitive strategies, motor skills, and attitude. Those things are very important thing when it comes to the development of the student. Their overall skills should be developed from those particular things. Distinct internal and external conditions are required for each type of learning. For instance, for cognitive strategies to be learned, there must be an opportunity for problem solving. Yes, in school, especially the subject is math, the student should develop their skill in problem solving in math. To learn attitudes, the learner must be exposed to credible rule, model, or arguments, especially debate in school, that are convincing and moving. That in school should develop the confidence of the student, their ability to recite and stand out to his her own self. The 5 categories of learning. The first one is the verbal information. Here in verbal information, there are have example of learning outcomes. Through verbal information, the student can stating previous learned materials, such as facts, concept, principles, and procedures. etc. Listing 14 learner-centered psychological principles. The true verbal, the student have the ability to state, to note, to take note of, rather, the lesson, of course the keywords especially, and of course those important details. The true verbal information, the student can critical thinking. They can use their ability to think. But from this situation, the ability of the student in verbal skill should improve and develop. Conditions of learning. The first one is draw attention to distinctive features by variation in print or speech. Yes, the student should develop their skill in in talking, particularly in speech, in having a a conversations with her classmate, especially when the child or when the student recite in front of her teacher. Present information so that it can be made into chunks. Yes, the student can what? Can gather some details or information. Provide a meaningful context for effective encoding of information. The true verbal, the student can seek a lot of information, especially when that voice are so much clear. Number 4, provide cause for effective recall and generalizations of information. The true verbal information, yung past or yung nakaraan na pinag-aralan ay maaaring ma-recall, maaaring mabalikan. Dahil generalize ng student ng previous task or previous topic, nare-recall. And we have, let's proceed to intellectual skills. What is intellectual skills? Discriminations, concrete concepts, defined concepts, rules, higher order rules. Those things should develop from student, that they can identify a concrete concepts. Of course, they can define concepts. They can determine what is rules and higher order rules. Yung student, they can distinguish objects. Na-identify na nila yung iba't ibang uri ng object, particular. Yung halimbawa, yung shapes, yung color, and also the features or symbol. They can distinguish those. Distinguishing an even and an odd number. May ability na yung student na ma-identify kung ano ba yung odd number. And all those things na kinakailangan nilang ma-identify, they have skill. The concrete concepts. What is concrete concepts? Identifying classes of concrete objects, features, or events. Iba pa, picking out all the red bits from a ball of bits. That from this concrete concept, those situations na yung student may ability na para pulutin, para ma-identify kung ano ba yung dapat niyang pulutin. May skill na siya na alam niya na kung ano ba yung dapat niyang gawin from that time. May skill na siya. May pag-iisip na siya. And we have defined concepts. They can able to classify new examples of events or ideas from their definition. Noting she shells as that from these defined concepts, yung student may ability na para malaman yung kahulugan ng particular thing. Kung ano ba yung nais niyang matutunan or ma-identify, or of course malaman yung kahulugan, may skill na siya. Because of their intellectual skill has been developed. Rather, unti-unti na nagkakaroon siya ng intellectual skills. May ability na siya to think. Number 1, call attention to distinctive feature. Yes. Na yung student, may ano na siya, may attention na siya para particularly, halimbawa, yung teacher is may identify. Yung student, they can able to concentrate about identifying that things na pinapahanap ng teacher. Number 2, stay within the limits of working memory. Yes, it should dapat yung pag-iisip ng bata is may limitasyon lang. Kung ano ba lang yung hangganan. Of course, may boundaries. Number 3, stimulate the recall of previously learned component skills. Dapat na stimulate or na ipaprocess yung or na i-recall yung nakaraan. Particularly, kung babalikan yung nakaraan na lesson. Dapat may skill na siya na mabalikan yun. magbalik tanaw sa previously or for example, yesterday, kung ano ba yung pinag-aralan kahapon. Number 4, present verbal cause to the ordering or combinations of component skills. That this, yung student, may na siya. Of course, yung those ability, may iba't iba na siyang uri ng component. Particularly sa verbal skills sa pag-iisip. Number 5, scheduled occasions for practice and space review. Dapat yung student may time na rin siya para sa pag-review. Dapat may skilled na siya. Mayroon na siyang pagkukusa sa kanyang sarili in taking of the review. Number 6, use a variety of contexts to promote transfer. Na those contexts na yung student is ita-transfer niya na yung kanyang skill in order na magkaroon ng outcomes. Kung ano ba yung kanyang natutunan. By applying it in their lives, of course. In 5 categories of learning, rules. Applying a single relationship to solve a class of problems. Computing average monthly of a company. That these rules, yung especially yung teacher and rather yung student, that when we say these rules, dapat yung student is aware na siya kung ano ba yung responsible sa loob ng klase. Especially in a company, yung monthly, of course, may nalalaman na yung every monthly salary or average. That applying a single relationship to solve a class of problems. That as a teacher or a student, aware na sila, especially yung teacher. Kung ano ba yung nararapat na i-apply niya para masolusyonan yung problema ng kanyang student. But then, ordered rules. Applying a new combinations of rules to solve a complex problem. Generating a balanced budget for a school organization. Now, from this situation, may budgetary fund, may humahawak ng finances na pang-budget ng isang organization. Na napupunta ito sa sa nararapat. In the 5 categories of learning, the cognitive strategies. That what is cognitive strategies? Employing personal ways to guide learning, thinking, acting, and feeling. Constructing concept maps of topics being studied. That when we say cognitive, this is the process in thinking of the child, of particular student. Na yung teacher is nagagay nila yung kanilang student para ma-process or para much more na ma-improve yung kanilang cognitive process, cognitive abilities, yung kanilang thinking. And also the number 1 is describe or demonstrate the strategies. The true cognitive strategies, i-demonstrate na ng student yung yung mga yung papademonstrate ng teacher. May kakayahan sila. And also to describe particular thing. Number 2, provide a variety of occasions for practice using the strategy. The true cognitive also, yung student na of course napapractice nila kung ano ba yung na dapat nilang i-provide sa studies nila. That when we say yung variety na uri na nararapat sa kanilang study, that when we say this, yung proper ways of studying the lesson, the availability to know about specific thing, and malaman ko ano ba yung lesson, and identify what those lesson is. Provide a variety of occasions for practice using the strategies. Provide informative feedback as to the creativity or originality of the strategy or outcome. Yan, nagkakaroon ng feedback ng student through cognitive. Nagiging na silang active and productive. Also, nakaka-cater na sila ng iba't ibang information through the discussions of the teacher. And also, attitudes. Choosing personal action based on internal states of understanding and feeling. Deciding avoid soft drinks and drinking at least 8 glasses of water every day. When we say attitudes, it's not talking about kung ano yung mismong ugali ng isang bata. Through these attitudes, may kaya na ang mga bata para mag-decide para sa kanilang sarili. Kung ano ba yung makakabuti para sa kanilang sarili. Especially, ano na sila is, alam na nila na, di ba, yung pag-iinom ng soft drink is at the same time, parami kasing amount ng sugar na nakakasira kung bakit nagkakaroon ng sakit sa sugar. Yes. Na from this attitude, yung student is tatanggihan na nila ang pag-inom ng soft drinks kasi alam na nila nakakasira ito ng kanilang kalusugan. And also, mas pipiliin na lang nila na uminom ng normal na glasses of waters, na 8 glasses of waters. Mas pipiliin nilang inumin kung ano ba yung mas masustansya, yung magpapaayos ng kanilang kalusugan. And number 1, establish an expectancy of success associated with the desired attitude. And ano na sila is, of course, may na rin silang expectation. And also, towards their nice attitude. Kung ano ba yung desire nila from their lives. Assure students' identification with an admired human model. That through these attitudes, mayroon na silang kakayahan kung ano ba yung ina-admire nila. Especially, sabihin natin, some of us, ina-idolize yung mga Koreano. Of course, yung mga artists na nagiging nila itong role model. Number 3, arrange for communications or demonstrations of choose of a personal action. Kaya dito may kakayahan na sila na isiping mabuti, na think before you post, think na pinag-iisipan nila bago sila nagkakandak ng isang action upang at the same time wala silang pagsisihan or regret. Give feedback for successful performance or allow observation of feedback in the human. Yes, alam na nila kung anong possibilities na magiging feedback ng kanilang magiging action. Especially in school. Halimbawa, magkakaroon ng activities. Yung students, syempre, paghahandaan na nila upang magkaroon ng maayos na feedback for them, their grades, para maging mataas yung kanilang grade. And also, the 5 categories of learning. For another is motor skills. Executing performances involving the use of muscles during the steps of the single dance. Yan, dito may may kakayahan na yung mga bata or yung student sa pagsasayaw kasi yung motor skills nila is nade-develop na kung ano ba yung step is nagagawa na nila. The present verbal or other guidance to cue the executive subroutine. Now, through verbal, of course, yung guide na susunod na ng mga bata, particularly yung step. And also, arrange repeated practice. Yes, through practice, dyan nahasa yung skill ng bata. In order for them to dance the single dance. Para masayaw nila ito ng maayos. na-execute na nila ng maayos. Number 3, furnish immediate feedback as to the accuracy of performance. Yes, dito na isa sa ayos na, napapolish na yung mga student. Kung ano ba yung dapat nilang sayawin, kakaroon na ng accuracy. Number 4, encourage the use of mental practice. Yeah, as a student, of course, our responsibility also na, magkaroon ng practice yung mental skill. Yung pag-iisip ng mas malalim, hindi basta-basta o hindi basta ura-urada ng gagawa ng mga bagay na hindi mo pinag-isipan. That you should think very deeply before you were going to conduct an action. Dapat pinag-iisipan mo ng mabuti yung bagay na gagawin mo in your life para at the same time wala kang pagsisiyan. It also gains principles. Number 2, learning hierarchies define what intellectual skills are to be learned in the sequence of instruction. That Gan suggests that according to complexity, stimulus recognition, response generations procedure, following use of terminology, discriminations, concept formation, rule application. In problem solving, the primary significance of the hierarchy is to identify prerequisites that should be completed to facilitate learning at each level. Prerequisites are identified by doing a task analysis of a learning training task. Learning hierarchies provide a basis for the sequencing of instruction. Dito sa number 2, principles of Gan, dito na develop na yung intellectual skill ng mga bata. Particularly to identify the proper instruction of the teacher. May kakayahan na sila sa pagsunod ng instruction in order for them to learn efficiently, effectively, na those information na nalalaman na nila, nagkakaroon na sila ng mas malalim na pag-unawa from those particular lesson. And of course, yung mga student may ability na sila to solve a particular task, especially task analysis, na from those things kakaroon na sila ng learning and training tasks, na those hierarchies are very significant for them na hasain yung kanilang intellectual skills, rather their sequence of instruction, na dahil dyan yung bata is mas natututo because naaangkop yung instruction ng pagkatuto nila. Number 3, events of learning operate on the learner in ways that constitute the conditions of learning. These events should satisfy or provide the necessary conditions for learning and serve as the basis designing instructions and selecting appropriate media. The theory includes 9 instructional events and corresponding cognitive process. The true conditions of learning, dahil sa pagsunod dito, of course, yung student is mas natututo kasi na-i-apply ng teacher kung ano ba yung applicable para sa mga bata upang much more na matuto. Now, because they do learning operate kasi nagkakaroon ng proper sequence of you're in school, particularly in instruction. And we have Kuhn's principles. Gaining attention, reception. That when we say gaining attention, yung mga bata is, nagkakaroon na sila ng ng pagtanggap or reception. Na yung mga bata is, nagkakaroon na sila ng awareness sa kung anong dapat nilang alamin or matutunan. Number 2, informing learners of the object expectancy. Na this expectancy, yung mga bata is na-inform kung ano ba yung mga dapat nilang matutunan from those previous lessons. Stimulating recall of prior learning retrieval. Stimulate na nababalikan na ng mga bata or na-retrieve na nila kung ano ba yung tinalakay ng nakaraan. May ability na sila upang balikan yung previous lessons. Presenting the stimulus, selective perception. So dito, yung student. Of course, may kakaya na sila para i-select yung especially yung mga dapat nilang tandaan, dapat nilang pag-aralan, or dapat nilang malaman. Providing learning guidance, semantic encoding. The truth, of course, yung responsibility ng teacher is, of course, i-guide nila yung kanilang mga student para much more na matuto from the lesson na i-apply yung appropriate ways of teaching para mas maging makabuluhan yung pag-aaral ng mga bata upang ganahan sila na mas more na matuto. Eliciting performance responding, na from those needs of the student na ibibigay ng teacher or yung naaangkop na needs ng mga bata sa pagkatuto. Providing feedback reinforcement, na kung ano ba yung mga natutunan ng bata is of course na itatanong ng teacher kung may natutunan ba yung kanyang student. Na dapat is of course, halimbawa, for example, may justification. May of course, may knowledge yung mga bata or reflection rather. And providing feedback. Ulit. Number 8, assessing performance retrieval. Especially dito sa pag-assess, dito na malalaman or much more na ma-proof kung may natutunan ba yung mga bata. Especially after the lesson, magkakaroon ng quiz, ng activities, in order to identify if the student talagang natuto. Enhancing retention and transfer. Na from those things, kinakailangan, of course, yung student may application. Not only just in school, but also in the outside of the school. Towards to their attitudes. So, dapat kung ano ba yung natutunan ng bata is, of course, kailangan madala niya ito maging sa paglabas ng paaralan. A good things should be understood and should be learned and gained by the student. And also the 9 instructional events. Event of instruction. The first one is gaining attention. Lesson example, conditions of learning. Teacher tells learners how she has used PowerPoint in the classroom. Shows an example or a PowerPoint. Asks learners questions about using PowerPoint. Through this gaining attention, kinakailangan, di ba nowadays, iba na yung platform ng studies ng pag-aaral ng mga bata. We have 2 setups. The first one is through modular and the second one is through online class platform. Na through that way, through online class, of course, usong-uso na ngayon yung technologies, particularly, especially yung teacher in terms of the discussions, in creating of their lesson plan, in terms of creating a PowerPoint, a lesson, they use a PowerPoint presentation. The true PowerPoint presentation, dyan i-discuss yung lesson. Yung mga dapat na matutunan ng kanyang student through a PowerPoint. Because dyan much more na nakakatch or dyan na yung attention ng mga bata. Yun yung attraction field ng mga bata para much more na mas magpursige or much more na mag-strive sa pag-aaral. Because yun na yung bagong style, yung strategies in terms of creating lesson plan, in creating, of course, particular topic, particular lesson through a PowerPoint. That that that's way, of course, yung student is much more nakaka-catch up or much more nakakasabay sa lesson. Especially nowadays, kailangan talaga na mas nakikita ng mga bata kung ano ba yung kanilang dapat pag-aralan. And we are rational. Giving background information creates validity. The use of multimedia grabs the audience attention. Dito na nga, nabanggit na. The true multimedia, dito nag-grabs yung attention ng audience. That audience is of course walang iba kundi yung mga bata, yung mga estudyante. And asking questions in the beginning creates an interactive atmosphere. Yan, that because nowadays through online class, mas more na-attract yung mga student sa pamamagitan ng ng new technique of presenting a lesson. Of course, through PowerPoint presentation. Diyan much more nakakasabay yung mga bata or much more natututo sila. Kasi yan na yung latest ngayon na mas updated na form ng pagtuturo. Number 2, informing the learner of the objective. Yes, of course, as a teacher, kinakailangan kung na dapat always dun sa lesson, nandun tatalakayin kung ano ba yung kailangan after the lesson, kung ano dapat yung ma-achieve after the discussion, kung ano ba yung objective that from that particular topic, kung ano ba yung dapat matamo ng mga bata after discussions of the lesson. The teacher says today, we are going to work on using a multimedia presentation software. Yes, kinakailangan na ito yung i-apply nowadays because sa new setup ng education this time, kinakailangan na ang paggamit ng iba't ibang uri ng multimedia, especially software. Make a learners aware of what to expect so that they are aware and prepared to receive. Yan, na dapat yung mga bata, of course, na i-inform kung ano ba yung objective, kung ano ba yung dapat nilang matutunan, kung ano ba yung dapat at the point na matapos yung discussion is matamo ng mga bata. Number 3, stimulating recall of prior learning. For this particular group of learners, they have learned previously about Microsoft Windows, particularly Microsoft Word. Teacher associates this knowledge with lesson at hand, especially sa paggawa ng mga sanaysay nowadays. Kadalasan na through WPS, through PDF converter, through that software, Microsoft Word, through that, dyan na mas pinapadali yung pagsusulat, yung easy writing ng mga bata. Because through that, sabihin na natin na sa pag-i-encode dyan, of course, hindi na mahihirapan yung mga bata kasi kailangan lang na i-input kung ano ba yung dapat na mailagay nila doon. That when learning something new, assessing prior knowledge is a major factor in the process of acquiring new information. Yan, kinakailangan of course na stimulate ng mga bata or na ipaprior nila yung yung lesson. Much more na dapat na natututo sila. Ano ba yung mga learning outcomes na dapat nilang matamo? At the same time, number 4, presenting the stimulus. Teacher gives students hands-on step-by-step tutorial on using Microsoft PowerPoint. Especially yung bata is walang kakayahan o hindi pa gaanong alam kung paano ba gumamit ng Microsoft PowerPoint. Especially sa pag-create ng isang PowerPoint. Because me as a future teacher, also kinakailangan na flexible ka, adaptable ka sa environment mo. Kinakailangan na kung ano yung ginagamit ng pangkalahatan, kinakailangan na alam mo rin kung paano ito gamitin. Particularly this Microsoft PowerPoint, sa pag-create ng PowerPoint, sa pag-present ng isang topic, kinakailangan na adaptable ka sa environment mo para makasabay ka sa kanila. The goal is information acquisitions. Therefore, the stimulus employed is written content and the actual software program. That is presenting the stimulus, kinakailangan yung bata, of course, natututo sila sa what? Sa software na dapat nilang matutunan. Especially, kasi ngayon sa bagong setup ng pag-aaral ng mga bata, kinakailangan na aware na rin sa mga iba't ibang uri ng software na kinakailangan may software program na naipipresent dapat ng teacher, kasi most of the time siya yung nakakaalam kung ano ba yung dapat na set up ng student in order for them to learn that things. And also, number 5, providing learner guidance. That when we say providing learner guidance, teacher demonstrates how to create a presentation. Teacher moves around and shows students how to use the tools to type text and link, add symbols and clip art, insert videos and diagrams, use sounds, iba pa. Learners are allowed to try the tools demonstrated in partners on their computers. Yan, kinakailangan of course yung student is alam ang lahat ng ito. Particularly yung pag-insert ng videos, yung clip art. Of course, yung pag-identify ng text, yung links, and so on and so forth. Kinakailangan yung student ngayon is aware na, skillful na sila pagdating sa technology. Pagdating sa mga software, kinakailangan adaptable na sila sa kanilang environment. And teacher uses discovery learning because learners are adults and it gives them the freedom to explore. Teacher facilitates the learning process by giving hints and codes when needed. Since the audience are pre-service with some basic level of technology, skills in the software program is easy to follow and understand. Guidance is minimal. And dapat yung teacher is very responsible sila sa kanilang mga estudyante. Na kinakailangan is nagpo-provide sila ng guidance for them to learn more about the technologies. From that time, yung student is dapat is alam yung ways ng pag-create ng isang PowerPoint, ng lessons, na kinakailangan is gina-guide ng teacher. For them, yung bata is much more na matuto, at the same time, magamit niya rin yun sa totoong magaganap sa kanyang buhay. Magagamit niya yun sa kanyang future. And also, number 6, eliciting performance. Teacher asks students to demonstrate PowerPoint tools. Yan, dito, dahil sa alam na ng bata kung paano ba gumamit ng PowerPoint, is dyan na yung time na maaari nang mai-apply ng bata yung student, yung kanyang natutunan, especially kapag siya na rin yung gagawa nito. If na-assign siya na mag-report, requiring the learner to produce based on what has been taught enables the learner to confirm their learning. Regular feedback enhances learning. Yan, kinakailangan, of course, yung bata is nag-excel siya sa kanyang studies. Particularly sa sa lesson. Kinakailangan na nakakaroon ng maayos na performance. Is nakakasabay siya. Particularly sa, of course, sa mga lesson through PowerPoint and sa pag-create nito. And 7, giving feedback. The teacher gives immediate feedback to learners after eliciting responses. Na dapat, of course, as a teacher is nag-guide pa rin nila yung kanila mga student even they know na natututo na yung kanila mga estudyante, but then at the same time kinakailangan pa rin ng guidance ng teacher, because especially kung halimbawa yung student is nahirapan sa pag-create or paggawa ng PowerPoint, na dapat at the same time kino-correct na ng teacher kung ano ba yung dapat na maging setup ng mga bata para much more na matuto. And number 8, assessing performance. Assign a practice activity. Create an electronic storybook using Microsoft PowerPoint. Teacher checks work. Yan dito, halimbawa, may ipapagawa yung teacher, particularly a task. Dun yung susukat yung abilidad ng bata para sagutan ito kung natuto ba siya or para mapatunayan kung may natutunan. Na if at the same time na mali or hindi tama yung kanyang ginawa, of course, responsibilidad ng mga teacher na i-correct kung ano ba yung dapat na i-correct. Na dapat na-assess yung abilidad ng mga bata in order for them para much more na matuto. Kasi kung ano yung mali is yun yung magiging stepping stone para much more na magpursige yung mga bata para much more na itama yung kanilang pagkakamali. Independent practice forces students to use what they learn and apply it. Assessing such gives instructors a means of testing student learning outcomes. And kinakailangan, of course, yung mga bata is maging independent rin at the same time. Especially, pag binigyan na sila ng oras para gawin ito, kinakailangan na gawin nila ito base sa kanilang kakayahan. Para at the same time, kung mahirapan sila, nandyan yung teacher para i-guide sila sa kung anong dapat nilang gawin. And lastly, number 9, enhancing retention and transfer. Teacher asks learners to create activities using PowerPoint presentation for 6th grade pupils. Teacher also assigned learner to teach another learner how to make PowerPoint presentation. Yan. Kinakailangan dito yung bata, or of course yung particularly yung grade 6th grade pupils, na at the same time sabihin na natin na kahit mga elementary pa lang, na kasi sa sistema ng edukasyon ngayon, through technologies na much natututo yung mga bata. So that kinakailangan na ituturo din ito sa mga estudyante kung paano ba gumawa ng isang maayos na PowerPoint. Kinakailangan rin na flexible dapat yung mga bata in order for them to learn more. Especially kapag naging na kapag pinaka-create sila, is kinakailangan na i-apply nila yung itinuro sa kanila. Na kinakailangan dito, yung mga bata is of course natatransfer na nila kung ano ba yung natutunan nila sa kanilang teacher. Na i-apply na nila kumbaga. And also applying learning in real life situation is a step towards mastery learning. Of course, yan yung pinakamahalagang sangkap ng pagkatuto ng mga bata, is kinakailangan na hindi lang sa loob ng paaralan sila natututo, na at the same time na dapat mas mataas yung amount na maia-apply nila ito in the real field. in the real world, sa labas ng paaralan, at the same time sa kanilang buhay, for their daily lives, rather na kinakailangan na much more yung mga bata is pinahalagahan nila ito as their learning tools for their lives. And additional rather, what are the significant contributions of Robert Gain in education? Robert Gain, 1916 to 2002, was an educational psychologist who pioneered the science of instruction in the 1940s. His book, The Conditions of Learning, first published in 1965, identified the mental conditions that are necessary for effective learning. That's all. Thank you. Thanks for listening and watching.